you know that this meeting is being recorded. So yeah, welcome everybody. I'm so happy to have you guys here for today's online chess session. But before we begin, I'd like to briefly share that this class is brought to you by Strategic Minds Foundation. Strategic Minds Foundation offers free online learning sessions for kids designed to help children strengthen their academic skills outside the classroom. At the heart of Strategic Minds Foundation is a deeper mission to make education more accessible to all. In addition to providing free online classes, the foundation is dedicated to helping underprivileged children get basic school supplies. So a little bit about me. My name's Arnav Doshi, and I'm really passionate about chess and teaching. And I have a USCF chess rating of more than 1400, and I've won 11th place at the National Middle School Chess Championship. And then just some basic rules for the class. Raise your hand if you want to speak, and then I'll give you a chance to talk. Please use your real name when joining the class. Be respectful to everybody, because kind words and listening ears make a great learning space. For the person that just joined, I would just like to let you know that this meeting is being recorded. And then keep the chat related to the topic so we can all stay on track and get the most out of our time together. So let's jump into the lesson. All right, so let's see what is chess all about. So as we all know, these are the 6 chess pieces. We have the king, queen, bishop, knight, rook, and pawn. Now, something that I also want to introduce with these chess pieces is point values, right? And each of these chess pieces, they have their own point values, which is basically just like a number which represents how much they're worth, right? So the pawn, we can think of it as having 1 point. And the pawn is like the least worthy piece or the least costly piece, however you want to think about it. Oh, that's nice to know. You're the same person that's going to class. That's nice to know. So we have the pawn, which is one pawn. It has 1 point. The rook is worth 5 points. The knights and the bishops are both worth 3 points, and the queen is worth 9 points. And I say that the king is worth infinity points because if you lose the king, then you lose the game. Or because in chess you can't actually lose the king. The king gets checkmated. So one way to think about it is that the king is worth infinity points. But the main point that I'm trying to make here is that the king is the most important piece in the game, and you should protect your king. And then some other things. Now you guys are probably wondering, like, what are these lines on the screen over here? So there's actually words, and those lines are arrows. And we have something that we call the knights and the bishops, we call them minor pieces. And then we call the queens and the rooks major pieces. And the reason that we do have it like this is that, like, usually, like, the knights and the bishops, they're usually kind of like similar. They're similar in their point values, and the rook and the queen, you'll often see that they're considered like heavyweight pieces, major pieces. They're like bigger, more powerful. So that's why we call the rook and the queen major pieces. Yeah, I mean, like, it's one way to. Excuse me. Excuse me. Infinity is one way to think about it, but like the point that I'm trying to make is that it has a lot of value, and you should really, you know, try to protect your king. So does anyone have any questions? Okay. So something else that I also wanted to talk about is like what happens when a pawn reaches the end of the board. And like what do I mean by a pawn reaching the end of the board? So basically, like, I'll show you a picture, but basically when the pawn is all the way at the other side of the board, like what happens? Because pawns, as if you can recall, that pawns, they only capture forward and diagonally, and they only move forward. So since they can't move backward, what do pawns do at the end of at the end of the board? Right? So basically pawns can, yeah, to the other side. Pawns can promote to a queen, rook, knight, or bishop. Now basically what I mean by that is that when the pawn reaches to the end of the board, it can turn into a different piece. And I'm going to show you guys what this looks like if you're playing online. if you were to play over the board, then and what I mean by over the board is that like if you had a physical chessboard and you had like you had like pieces set up and you're like playing with someone, your friend at his house or something like that, an in-person situation, then you would just like put put the pawn on the eighth or put the pawn on the edge of the board, take it off the board, and then put whatever piece you want inside of the pawn. And that's how you would play it. And then in online, what happens is that this is a white pawn, and the white pawn is moving this way. So um, what we can do is that we can take this pawn, right? And when we move it to the final square, you'll see that we have lots of options here. And based on whatever options, that is what. Um, so, do you have a question? Um, you said in the chat that is what. No. Oh, you said in the chat that is okay. So no question. Okay. So yeah, when you like reach the edge of the board, what happens is that it can just turn into a different piece, and you can just look at it, whichever piece you want to turn it into. Usually, like you want to turn it into a queen because the queen is the most powerful piece. And if I want to turn it into a queen, then have a queen, and then we can just continue playing the game. Any questions on pawn promotions or how they work? Okay, so that seems like everything makes sense. So something else that I wanted to talk about is stalemate. And sometimes you'd be wondering, right? You have black, or let's say some player is not in check, but they can't do anything that like is allowed. They can't move any of their pieces. They can't move their king because wherever they move their king, it's under attack. And this is actually called stalemate. And when stalemate happens, it's kind of like a draw. So like when checkmate happens, a player wins, and then when stalemate happens, it's like a draw. So it's like an equal result between the two players. And to see what stalemate looks like, I have some examples here. So over here, it's black to move, and we have this black king over here, and we see that wherever the black king moves, the white queen could capture the king, and if another piece can capture the king, when the king moves there, then that's not allowed. So if we're trying to move over here, then the white queen would go there. If we move over here, then the white queen would go over there. And similarly, if we move over here, then the white queen would also go over there. So that's why this would be a stalemate and it would be a draw because it's black's move and he can't do anything. So it's like a draw and it's like an equal result. So like how it works is that usually when you win, it's like 1 point, and then if you lose, it's 0 points, and then if you draw, it's like half a point. So that's usually how it works. Like when you're going to like tournaments, and when you play it, then if you win, you'll get like 1 point, and if you lose, then you get 0 points, and if you draw it, you'll get half a point, and then based on that, the total of your points is how they rank you with the other competitors. So yeah, that's just how it works. Now, this is another example of stalemate. And then basically over here, the white queen controls this forward up here on the F file, and along this diagonal, this this long diagonal over here. And then the one square that the king could move to that is not controlled by the queen is this square h7, but h7 is actually controlled by the king, so the black king has no moves, and therefore it is stalemate, and so it's a draw. So does anyone have any questions on how stalemate works, or does it make sense? Okay. So let's continue. So over here, it is white to move, and I want you guys to try and figure out if white is in stalemate or not. Right? Does white have a move? Does white have a legal move? Is what they say sometimes, but it's basically the same thing as does white have a move that is allowed? So yeah, does white have a move that is allowed? And I just want you guys to think about it for maybe 30 seconds, and then um yeah, you may speak. The person that raised their hand, yes. Um yeah, you guys can just speak. I'll lower your hand, and then you can say, or you can just unmute and then speak, or yeah, or you guys can message in the chat, whichever one is more convenient for you. F2. Yeah, the king can move to F2. Um okay. Um so the thing about this is that the only place that the king can move is to this square, and you might think that the king can move over here and capture this rook, but it actually can't do that because the rooks they
Because of the other one.
did you say something? Do you wanna
Because there is an other one.
yeah, yeah. Because there are two rooks, yes, and both the rooks they defend each other, right? So for example, if the king was to move over here, then this rook would come and capture the king. So it can't take the rook, and then there's a similar situation for the other rook, right? If the king were to move over here, then that rook would come and go capture the king. Okay, so does it make sense? Okay, okay. Um, so let's look at another one, right? And in this one, it's black to move, and we have to try to figure out if he has any squares that he can move to and that are legal or allowed, so that they're not defended. Like no one attacks him there. So if you guys have an answer, then you guys can raise your hand, and then F7, yeah, or enter in the chat as I was gonna say. So F7. I'm talking about the F7. Okay. So Vishwalata, I believe is your name. I apologize if I mispronounced it. And then King F7 is not allowed because the bishop is there. And then your name is Arush. Okay. Okay. Um, so Arush. So if the king moves to F7, then the bishop is also can also go to that square. So the king can't move to F7. And then Shuhoi, uh, E7, yeah, E7 is usually how we talk about it. It's usually how we say it. You usually say the letter first and then the number, but E7, yeah, that is the place where the king can move because there are no pieces that can defend that square. And if you look at it, this may seem confusing, but the idea is that the knight defends this square E6 and this square F5. This bishop, the dark squared bishop, defends E5, and then the rook defends g5, g6, and then g7, and this bishop, this light square bishop, defends f7. So e7 is the only spot that the king can move. Oh, sorry. Your name's Robert. Okay. Um, yeah. Okay. Uh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Um, so let's start. Let's take a shot at another one. So in this one, it's black to move, and it's okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Um, it's black to move, and let's see. Does black have a move that's allowed? And I'll just put your hand down, and then when you guys have the answer again, you guys can just either send it in the chat or e yes e5 e5. Okay. Um, Robert, what move do you think that the black king can have, or any black piece for that matter? And Arush, you said e5. I assume you're talking about king e5, this move. Um, but the bishop can actually go there, so the king cannot move to e5 actually. Does it make sense why the king can't move to e5? Yes, okay. Um, you want to take like another shot at, what are some moves maybe black can make, or if black is in stalemate? So for this one, there's actually multiple moves that black can make, and something that I want to draw your attention to is these two pawns, right? So in stalemate, it doesn't mean that the king can't move anywhere. It means that any piece can't move anywhere. So this pawn right here on c6 and this pawn over here in the red circle on g7 both can move one step forward. And in fact, the pawn on g7 can even move two steps forward. And another option is that the king can move to e7. So that's why this is not stalemate, because there's like four different moves that black can make, and they're all perfectly allowed. So it just doesn't make sense why the black king is not in stalemate, or the black player is not in stalemate. And if you guys have like any questions, and you guys can just like send them in the chat or like raise your hand and then speak, and then yeah, anything's fine. And if you guys like understand, then you can actually just say like it's all good in the chat. So like I know that it's making sense and I'm not speaking in an alien language to you guys. So yeah. Okay. Um so let's continue. Alright, so that's stalemate. Now we talked about capturing pieces along with, how to move pieces in the novice class. But capturing is basically when you take something that's that's the other player's piece. And something related to capturing is trading, right? So trading is you get some pieces, but you also lose some pieces, right? And it's important to figure out like, what is a good trade, because sometimes, if you're losing a queen and you're only getting a pawn, and if the pawn's worth 1 point and the queen's worth 9 points, then maybe it's not a good trade. So the example that I talked about losing pawns and queens is like a way that, you know, you figure out if you're doing a good trade or not, right? And to figure out, like, use points of the pieces that you lose and points of the pieces that you get, and then based on that you can figure out if it was a good trade or if it was not a good trade. And it's a good trade if you lose less points than your opponent, and it's okay. It's an okay trade if you and your opponent lose the same amount of points. But if you're losing more points than your opponent, for example, you're only getting a pawn and you're losing a queen, which means that the opponent is getting a queen, then your opponent gets 9 points and you get 1 point. And since 9 is bigger than 1, that's not good for us, so we should not go through with that trade. So I want to show you guys some examples of like trades and whether they're good or not, right? So over here we have this trade is when you trade for a piece that is more or the same. Yeah, I guess like a good trade is like when you trade a piece for a piece, but sometimes like you can say exchange or trade to represent any like exchange of pieces or like any like process any time like you lose some pieces and they lose some pieces. And the way that I'm using it is that trade is like when you lose some pieces and they lose some pieces, and a good trade is like when you guys both lose like an equal amount of pieces or you gain pieces. Does that make sense? It's just like a different perspective about thinking of the same thing. It's just different words, but it's the same concept. So if you want me to say like, if you want me to say bad trade, if you want me to say bad trade, and then bad trade, even trade, or fair trade, and then good trade is how I can say it, because just to improve the clarity. So a bad trade is when you lose more than your opponent. A fair trade is when you guys both lose the same amount of stuff, and then a good trade is when you lose less than your opponent. So in this case, if you were to capture this pawn here on b5 with your white bishop, then would that be a bad trade, a fair trade, or a good trade? What do you guys think? Bad trade. Yeah, so it's a bad trade because what happens is that you would take this pawn, right? And then he would take your bishop, and in the end of everything, he has a knight which is worth 3 points, and you have a pawn which is only worth 1 point. So you lose 2 points. You get one, and then you lose three. So bishops are worth 3 points. Bishops and knights, they're both worth 3 points. Um, okay, yeah. Just wanted to clarify that, because yeah. And then so let's look at another one, right? So this one over here. So usually when you're like trying to figure out how a trade works, you want to assume that the opponent and you should both start capturing with the lowest piece, right? But sometimes people don't start capturing with the lowest point value piece and they just start with the middle. So in this case, we have this white knight capturing this pawn over here. And at the end of everything, will this be a bad trade for black? For black, will it be a bad trade, a good trade, or a fair trade? At the end of everything. I want you guys to think about it. Because even though the knight is capturing a pawn and white has a pawn that's defending, the only thing that black can capture with is a knight. Black can't capture the knight with the pawn. So think about it for some time, and then it's a bad trade. So both of you guys think it is a bad trade. Okay. Bad for white. Okay, it's a bad trade for white. I'm assuming, Robert, you're also referring to a bad trade for white. Fair. It's a fair trade. Okay, it's a fair trade. So we have one fair trade and one bad trade. So it actually is a fair trade. Now, you guys may be confused, like, how is it a fair trade? Because, he can take with the pawn, but he's taking with the knight. But something important is that after he takes with the knight, right, black can't take with the pawn. Black also has to give up his knight. So far, right now, white lost the knight and white gained a pawn. But it's white's move, and now white has gained a pawn, right? So now white has a pawn and black doesn't have a pawn. But it's black's move again, and the queen can capture the pawn. So it's a perfectly fair trade, even though white chose to start off with the knight instead of the pawn. Because black only could capture with the knight, he wasn't like forced to, he didn't have any reason to stop the trade. Because even after here, and then here, and here, white is white is up a pawn, and this is why black would choose to capture the pawn, so he can restore equality. Does that make sense? Excuse me. But does that make sense? More or less on why it's like a fair trade? Yeah. Robert says yeah. Okay. Arush, does it make sense? Or yeah. Okay. That's great. So I want you guys to try this one out. It's white to play, and if white is to capture this rook over here on f7, would it be a good trade, a bad trade, or a fair trade for white? So yeah, you guys can like think about it, and then whenever you guys like have an answer, you guys can just like send it in the chat or like unmute and speak. Good trade. Okay, so Robert says it's a good trade. Okay. Um, Good trade. Arush also says it's a good trade. Okay. So yeah, good job, both of you guys. You guys are both right. It is a good trade, and it's a good trade because when white captures the rook, white gets 5 points, and then when black captures the knight, black only gets 3 points. And then if you look at the board afterwards, everything else is almost the same except white has a rook and black has a bishop, so white is up 2 points of material. So yeah, that's kind of the word material is usually how you talk about it when like someone is up or down some amount of points, and you can just say like white is up 2 points of material. And if you don't want to say like white has a rook for a bishop, then like a shorter way to say that is just white is up 2 points of material. So yeah. Now, here's another one, right? So this one's a bit tricky, and what I want to ask you guys is this um is this move? Actually, I'm gonna take this out for now. Okay, that's better. So whoops. Is this trade fair? Or is it fair, good, or bad for white? Sorry. And you guys can like fair or good or bad. Um, Arushi said yes. I'm not sure which one you said yes to. So yeah, fair. Okay. Um, Robert, what do you think? Good, fair, bad? If you're speaking, I can't hear you. Yeah. because I do see that you are unmuted. So if you're speaking, I can't hear you. But this is a fair trade because when you capture, then after what happens is that okay. So actually, oops. So this trade is fair, yeah, and then you can just capture back. You lose three and then you get three, yeah. So I'm gonna move this out of the way. And there's actually like something else when you're doing trades, right? So there's like you want to count attackers and defenders, right? You want to figure out how many pieces are attacking and defending a piece. And when there's like a huge like buildup in the center, or usually there's like a huge build. Sometimes there'll be a huge buildup in the center of like just 15 pieces attacking, 15 pieces attacking one pawn. And like during those like buildups in the center, it's it's important to like figure out, if you can actually capture the pawn at that time or not, for example, if it's a pawn. And one strategy that we can use to figure out if we can is that you can count attackers and defenders. And I saw both of you guys um said that you guys do this a lot in your games. So I think this strategy of counting attackers and defenders will really help you guys figure out, if you're making a good trade or not. So this is an example, right? And it's white to move. And for this one, I want you guys to count the attackers and defenders of this knight over here. So you can use rooks and two pawns. No, what I'm saying is like in this current position, how many pieces are defending this knight and how many pieces are attacking the knight? Yeah, yeah. But yeah, you are right. If it were black to move, then he could play that move and he could get an extra defender for the knight. So I like talk about how we figure this out, right? So the way that we do this is that you just look at all of your pieces, right? You look at all of your pieces except this one knight. So if we were black, wait, I'm gonna flip the board for a second. Okay, so we're black, and we're figuring out how many pieces are defending this knight, yeah? So there are two pieces defending the knight, as you said, Arush, yes. Um, one is this rook over here on e8, and the second is this pawn, right? So there are two defenders that are defending this piece. And now we have to count the attackers for the piece, right? So this queen attacks the piece because it can move there in one move. The knight attacks the piece because it can also move there in one move. And this rook on e1 also attacks the knight. So you would just count 1, 2, 3, 3 pieces attack, and then 1 and 2, 2 pieces defend. Now, we use this strategy of counting attackers and defenders combined with figuring out if it's a good, fair, or bad trade to figure out if we can go ahead and execute like trading. So in this case, it's white's move. So I'm gonna flip back to white's side, and over here we see that we have more attackers than defenders, and that's the tipping point. So to be able to like be on top after all the trades happens, like you want your piece to be the final like move of the trade, you have to make sure that you have more attackers than defenders. That's an important point, right? So in this case, white has 3 attackers and black has 2 defenders. So in the end, white will be on top. So that's a good sign, right? That means okay, we can go ahead. And then the second thing that we have to check is every single trade in the process fair or good for us? So first, what's going to happen is that usually when we like when we assemble a lot of pieces to attack one piece in the opponent, one of the opponent's pieces, then you usually want to start capturing with your lowest point valued piece, which in this case, we have the queen and the knight and the rook can all capture, but from these, the lowest valued piece is the knight. So we start off by capturing with the knight. And then after that, black is also going to capture with the lowest valued piece. So he's going to capture with the pawn. And then we're again going to capture with the lowest valued piece, which in this case from the queen and the rook is the rook. So we capture with the rook, and then black captures the rook, and then we capture his rook. And at the end of everything, what happens is that we're just up a pawn, right? We have a pawn, and black doesn't have that pawn. If you count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns for black, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns for white. So that like entire sequence of trades and exchanges was good for white. Do you guys like get the idea of like how we're counting attackers and defenders to like figure out if something we should go through with capturing something or not? All right, that's good. That's good. So I have another example, right? So it is black to move, I think. Yeah, it's black to move. And black wants to capture this pawn over here on d4, right? Now, we have to figure out if black can do that. So if we look at the attackers and defenders right now, then we'll see that we can see that this knight over here, it can move there in one square. So the knight's a defender. And similarly, this queen can also move there. This knight can't move over there because all the squares I can move to are light squares. And this is a dark square. So the knight can't move there. This bishop also can't move there because it's a light square bishop and this pawn is on a dark square. So this bishop's also not a defender, and neither of these rooks are defending the pawn. Now let's look at the black position. So we can see that this knight can go there in one move. Similarly, this bishop can go there in one move. So those are two attackers. But aside from that, there are no other pieces that can, capture that pawn. So one way to use this attacking and defending counting that we're doing, right? We see right now that black only has two attackers and white has two defenders. So, but there's one important thing in this position. This bishop over here, um, Arush, you said it's good for black. Um, are you saying that the position is good for black? Is that what you're like going on? Is that what you're trying to like say? Or is the trade good for black? Or I'm not sure what you mean by like what is good for black. So if you can like clarify it, that would be nice. Trade. The trade is good for black. Okay. So the trade as of right now in this moment is actually not good for black, right? Because there are two attackers, right? And there's two defenders. And the condition for like a trade being good is that you have more attackers than defenders. And we can like go through the sequence, right? So first he would take with the knight, and then white would take with the knight, and then white would take with black would take with the bishop, and then white would take with the queen. And at the end of everything, white has a knight and black doesn't. And black has a pawn, but knights are worth more than pawns. So this trade is actually not good. And the reason is that the number of attackers and defenders are the same. So for a trade to be good, there has to be more attackers than defenders. Does that make sense? Like you get it? Yeah, yeah. So it's that there has to be more attackers than defenders because like what happens is that the attacker, they like move first. So if there's like an equal amount of attackers and defenders, then when the attacker moves, then the defender will always get to move after the attacker. And at the end of everything, since there's one attacker for one defender and the defenders move second, the defender's on top. So That's why we have to have more attackers than defenders if we want to go through with the full exchange. But the point that I was trying to get at is that right now, white has two defenders and black has two attackers. But this bishop over here is not involved in attacking, but this knight over here is involved in defending. So what we can do is that we can play this move over here, and this makes white forced to respond. White has to do something, right? White in this case, for example, capture the bishop. Now, if we were to count attackers and defenders, then we'll see that black has two attackers, but white only has one defender for this pawn over here. So after black makes that trade, that was a fair trade, by the way, because like, bishop 3 points, knight 3 points. Oops, this was a fair trade. Because now it's a fair trade, what white can do and what black can do is black can capture, and then now the queen would not capture because getting a knight and losing a queen is not a fair trade. So at this point, black has a pawn and white does. So that's how you can use like you're not you that's how you can like use the attackers and defenders to figure out what your next move should be, right? So if you see that you don't have that many attackers, then there's two ways you can resolve the issue. Option number one, exchange a non-attacker with a defender, and option number two is move a piece so that it attacks whatever you want to attack. So does that like idea of like using the attackers and defenders to like make your next move like make sense? Okay, it does. Okay. Arush, does it make sense? It's okay if it doesn't make sense. You can say that it doesn't make sense and I'll explain it again. It makes sense? Okay. Or do you want me to explain it again or does it make sense? It doesn't make sense. Or just say no again if it doesn't make sense and yes if it makes sense. I'm sorry for asking too many questions. Okay, so it makes sense. Okay. Um, so I want you guys to try this, right? It's white to move. I'll add that. It is white to move. And you guys should just look at it over here, up here on the top right, who it is to move. And then, so it's white to move. And I want you guys to try to figure out if, um, if taking this knight, how many attackers and defenders does this black knight have over here on f6? And then you can just say like 2 attackers, 5 defenders, and then in the chat or raise hand or whatever is most comfortable to you guys. Robert, I see that you're unmuted, but I can't hear anything. So if you're talking, I just want to let you know that I can't hear you. And yeah. Does like the idea of counting attackers and defenders like make sense to you guys? Or okay, so I'll talk about the solution to this exercise. And if you guys have any questions, one attack or one defender. Okay. Close. Yes, you are right about the fact that there is one attacker. There is one attacker, which is this bishop over here on b2. That is one attacker. And which the one defender is the king. So the king can defend things, yeah, but there's also another defender is which is the queen. So the queen also defends the knight because it would be able to move that square in one move. So that's why there's one attacker. I mean, yeah, there's one attacker and there's two defenders. Does that make sense? Why do you like two defenders? Because the king can also go there, and then the queen can also go there. You can unmute and speak, Robert. If you're speaking and I can't hear you, I think there might be like some sort of audio problem on your end. You can just type in the chat. It is a bad trade. Um, so I see where you're coming from. That like it's a bad trade because there's only one attacker and two defenders. But in this case, it's actually an okay trade. For example, if we were to go and take the knight, then black would, for example, take with the queen, and then it's perfectly fine because black because white lost a bishop and then black lost a knight, and they're both worth 3 points. So they both lose the same amount of points, so it's like a fair trade, even though there's less attackers than defenders. Does it make sense? Where okay, but something that we can do to make it good for us, right, where we have more attackers than defenders, is that we can play this move, right? And what this move does is that the black king has to move because he's in check and he can't block the check, nor can he capture the queen. So he has to move over here. And right now, there's two attackers and one defender. So at this point, you would start off with the lowest point valued piece, you capture the knight, and then you'd continue playing the game. And now, you're just up a knight. Or actually, you won a knight. Uh, yeah, you can speak, Robert. Checkmate. Okay. Um, Now in this position, it's actually like really close to checkmate, but it's not quite checkmate because black can capture the bishop with his queen, and after black loses the queen, certainly not good for. It's not certainly much better. It's certainly a much better scenario for um, white, but it's actually not quite checkmate. Do you get why it's not checkmate? Yeah, it's still good. It's still really good. It is still really good because after this point, black has to lose his queen, and now white is just better because white has up 5 points of material. Because first he has the queen for the rook, and then he has an extra pawn. No, yeah, he has an extra pawn. This is the extra pawn. Does it make sense? For the attackers and defenders part, how there's like over here, there's one attacker. Okay, okay. So for this point, it's white to move, and it's white to move. And can white capture this pawn on f7? Like in terms of how many attackers and how many defenders are um on that pawn on f7? You guys want to like take a shot and try to figure out how many attackers and how many defenders are on this pawn on f7, and then the circle one in green, and then if you guys like have an idea, then you guys can like send in the chat what you guys think. Hi, yeah. Um, you said the trade it's good. Okay, wait. So, um, what I'm asking, it is a good trade, yeah, because what I'm asking for is like how many attackers and like how many defenders are on this pawn. So yes, there are more attackers than defenders for white, and ultimately that really is all that matters. So white can go ahead and capture the pawn. And Robert, you are right about how it's good. But I just wanted to like show that those knights, yeah, black can't kill the knight, yeah, because black doesn't have enough defenders to kill the knight because there's only one defender here. So yeah, and this is kind of like the rook scenario all the way back at the beginning, where the knights they both protect each other. Oops, the knights they both protect each other because they're both nice. So yeah, that's like a good observation. Yeah, the king is very weak. Yeah, the king is quite weak, and the queen is also under attack. So yeah, this is a good position for white. Yes, you're very right about that, Robert. Now, we only have like around 3 minutes left in the class. So or actually wait, yeah. Oops. So we only have like 3 minutes left in the class, and the next thing that I was going to talk about was like about openings, and that will take some time. And I think it's better that if I explain it all in one class. We have 7 minutes. Okay, let's see. Wait, 7 minutes. Oh yeah, we do have 7 minutes. So but I don't think 7 minutes is enough to explain openings, and I think that it would be better if I explained all of the openings like together, because then it would just make sense. So I think we'll end the class for today. I want to thank you guys all for joining. I hope you guys were able to learn something. I hope the class was able to help you. Um, I'll send the recording to the class. I'll send it via email, just how you guys have been getting the links to the meetings, and then and then I'll also for the next class, it'll be on Sunday at 10 a.m. Central Time, and then we'll continue talking. We'll talk about openings in that class, and then we'll see what's after that. So I'm gonna stop the recording now.